The drama surrounding the WNBA has reached a boiling point, a moment where whispers have turned into accusations, and accusations into a full-blown scandal, threatening to shake the league to its very foundation. It all began with one voice, a whistleblower who refused to stay silent any longer. A former referee has come forward, pulling back the curtain on what he claims is a web of corruption, manipulation, and influence, reaching the highest levels of women's basketball. And at the center of it all, the spotlight now falls directly on Commissioner Cathy Engelbart. For years, fans have argued about questionable calls, uneven officiating, and games that never quite felt fair. But few could have imagined that behind the bright lights, behind the carefully managed image of progress and empowerment, there might have been something darker at play. When the whistleblower spoke out, he didn't just criticize bad refereeing. He accused the league itself of orchestrating outcomes. He claimed that the results of some WNBA games weren't determined on the court, but in backroom discussions, conference calls, and the private agendas of people with too much power and too much to lose. It all started with a single interview. A veteran referee, known for years of officiating high-profile WNBA matchups, finally broke his silence. His words were calm but heavy with implication. He described how referees were sometimes given what he called unofficial guidance. Subtle cues about which players to watch more closely, which fouls to emphasize, and even when to tighten or loosen control of the game. It wasn't about blatant score fixing, it was about narrative control. Ensuring certain teams stayed in contention, that star players remained in the spotlight, and that television ratings never dipped. He never mentioned Cathy Engelbert by name, not directly. But when he spoke of pressure from above, the implication was clear. According to him, league officials wanted games to be more entertaining, more unpredictable, and most of all, more profitable. And to achieve that, referees were sometimes expected to manage outcomes in ways that aligned with business goals rather than basketball fairness. Fans who had long dismissed conspiracy theories suddenly began connecting the dots. Suspicious fouls, unbalanced officiating. Star players benched early for questionable calls, while others seemed untouchable no matter how rough they played. The whistleblower's claims reframed years of frustration. Maybe those weren't mistakes. Maybe they were orders. As his story spread, the conversation grew darker. The referee hinted that some of the manipulation might not have been about entertainment at all, but about money. Real money. He described how people with financial interests in certain games, including those connected to gambling operations, could exert subtle pressure on referees. Sometimes it started innocently, a friendly tip, a favor, a conversation. But over time, debts were created, obligations formed, and loyalties bought. "You think it'll stay small," he said during his interview. "You think you'll just give them what they want for a few months and walk away? But once you're in, you're theirs. And if you try to stop, they'll ruin you." It sounded like something out of a crime movie, but the details were chillingly real. The whistleblower claimed that organized gambling interests had quietly infiltrated the sports world for years, manipulating insiders and officials through intimidation and debt. The WNBA, in his words, was just the latest victim of a machine far bigger than anyone wanted to admit. When his story hit the airwaves, social media exploded. Fans began combing through past footage, replaying games frame by frame. What they found was alarming. Moments that once seemed like random errors now looked like patterns. Star players consistently caught in early foul trouble, underdogs losing momentum right after taking a lead, and statistics revealed that some teams received a disproportionate number of favorable calls during nationally televised games. Analysts started publishing side-by-side comparisons, showing how certain matchups seemed almost scripted. A perfectly timed sequence of controversy, comeback, and victory designed to keep viewers hooked. Then came the leaked documents. Screenshots of supposed internal emails, though not yet verified, circulated online. They hinted at competitive pacing and protecting fan interest in key markets. The phrasing was clinical, corporate, but the meaning was unmistakable. If true, it meant the league wasn't just managing its image. It was managing the very outcomes of its games. As journalists pressed the league for answers, the WNBA's response was swift but shallow. A short statement was released denying all allegations, insisting that integrity was at the core of every decision. But to many it sounded rehearsed, the kind of carefully crafted language meant to contain fallout, not reveal truth. and Cathy Engelbert's silence became deafening. Engelbert, who had come to the WNBA from a corporate background, had always championed business growth and sponsorship expansion. Under her leadership, the league had secured major television deals, celebrity endorsements, and a wave of new interest driven by stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. But critics argued that her approach had blurred the line between sports and show business. Ratings came first, fairness second. The WNBA, once a beacon of athletic integrity, was starting to look more like a brand than a league. Several former staff members even claimed that concerns about referee accountability had been raised internally, only to be dismissed as isolated incidents. One former assistant recalled a meeting where Engelbert allegedly emphasized protecting the league's image above all else, particularly during high-profile matchups involving the league's biggest stars. To those who were there, it sounded like a warning: keep the show going no matter what it takes. By now, sports media was circling like vultures. Headlines questioned whether the WNBA had sacrificed integrity for entertainment. Talk shows debated whether the league had become a manufactured product. Engelbert's refusal to speak publicly only intensified suspicion. For someone known for her polished media presence, her silence was telling, almost strategic. But behind closed doors, insiders said panic was spreading. And then came another revelation, one that connected the scandal to the very thing the league had been promoting so aggressively: gambling. Over the past few years, the WNBA, like many professional sports leagues, had leaned heavily into sports betting partnerships. Fans were encouraged to engage responsibly, but betting was now part of nearly every broadcast. Promotional codes, sponsor logos, and odds graphics filled the screen. But what if the league's financial ties to betting platforms had created an opening for corruption? According to investigative reporters, certain game results aligned perfectly with major betting swings, shifts so precise they couldn't have been coincidence. The whistleblower confirmed that he had seen communication between officials and outside parties who appeared to have insider knowledge. He didn't name names, but the implication was chilling. Some people may have known the outcomes before the games even started. That's when a former NBA referee, infamous for his own gambling scandals, stepped forward. He warned that once gambling infects a league, it's almost impossible to remove. It starts with a phone call, he said, then a favor, then an expectation. Before long, the integrity of the game isn't even in question. It's gone. The WNBA suddenly found itself in the crosshairs of something much larger than a few bad calls. Sports analysts began connecting betting patterns, sponsorship money, and referee decisions. Congress members called for transparency, and fans demanded federal oversight. Meanwhile, current and former players began to speak, not publicly at first, but through cryptic posts and anonymous interviews. One veteran player said she'd felt it in her bones that something was off. "You can feel it," she explained. "When the league wants a rivalry to stay alive, the whistle changes." Her statement went viral, amplifying the conversation about control, manipulation, and the cost of silence. Younger players, especially rookies, expressed growing discomfort. Some felt they were being used to sell a product rather than compete in a fair sport. Player union representatives demanded an emergency meeting with Engelbert, pressing for accountability. For years, the WNBA had championed empowerment and equality, but now, players were asking if they were simply pawns in a corporate chess game. As pressure mounted, ESPN, Fox Sports, and countless independent journalists picked up the story. Social media was ablaze with clips dissecting questionable calls. The phrase "rigged for ratings" trended for days. Engelbert's name was everywhere, tied to speculation, outrage, and demands for her resignation. Inside league offices, sources described chaos. Emergency meetings, deleted emails, lawyers advising silence, sponsors quietly distancing themselves. And yet the WNBA continued to project confidence, insisting that the league's integrity remained beyond reproach. But the public wasn't buying it. The timing, the patterns, the money, everything pointed toward something systematic, not accidental. Then, as the scandal reached its peak, the whistleblower sat down for one final interview. This time he named names. He cited specific games, referees, and even league officials allegedly involved in shaping outcomes. He described direct communication from executive influence, urging referees to keep games balanced for broadcast value. In one example, he recalled being told through a headset during a live game to let the play go, rat. Her then call a foul because the game needed more excitement for TV. Even more shocking, he produced what he claimed was an internal memo discussing narrative-driven engagement. The document's authenticity has yet to be confirmed, but its contents were damning. Language about controlling competitive pacing and ensuring viewer retention during key matchups. To many, it read less like a sports policy and more like a marketing strategy. Within hours, the interview went viral. Hashtags like #SarRiggedLeague and .WNBA exposed dominated the internet. Sponsors began reviewing contracts. Petition sites filled with demands for an independent investigation. Even some WNBA players publicly praised the whistleblower's courage, calling for reform. By the end of the week, the league wasn't just fighting bad publicity, it was facing a potential federal investigation. Lawmakers called for transparency, urging the Department of Justice to review the allegations. For the first time in WNBA history, the league's very legitimacy was under question. Inside the organization, fear took hold. Reports surfaced of staffers being told not to speak to the press, of files being quietly removed, of meetings happening behind closed doors. The league that had once prided itself on progress now seemed paralyzed by damage control. When Cathy Engelbert finally stepped in front of cameras weeks later, her demeanor was calm but detached. She denied all allegations, praised the hard work of league officials, and promised to review procedures to ensure transparency. But her words fell flat. The press room was tense. Reporters pressed for answers about the memo, the leaked emails, and the whistleblower's claims, but Engelbert dodged specifics, offering corporate phrases instead of clarity. It was too little, too late. Sponsors pulled back. Fans walked away. Players, once the heart of the WNBA, began to lose faith in the institution that governed them. What had been the dawn of a new era for women's basketball now stood on the edge of collapse. The league's credibility wasn't just questioned, it was crumbling.